I work in a church in town. I was in my office on the floor, and I don't know, when it comes to all this kind of stuff, I love to like have this on the floor and this on the floor and just stuff all over the floor. So I was on the floor in my office, and I was looking over this talk, and I just really almost started crying and just thought, do you believe it? You know, you're going to go tell other people, do you really believe that this is true? And so I went next door to somebody else's office who's seen a little bit more life than I have, and she just said, it is true, and God's faithful. And I know that you know it in here, but sometimes we don't know it both places. We don't know it in our head, in our heart, and we don't live it out. So I hope this will be encouraging for myself and for y'all as we seek to sort of take in the truth and then live it out. In, I guess, about the past year and a half, I've been to Haiti twice. And I think that's so neat because I've never been on a foreign mission trip before. And so to say I went twice in a short period of time seems just kind of crazy that I ended up back there. But it's an awesome experience to take a trip like that. And Haiti's unique, obviously, because their situation is so dire in so many ways compared to what we think about our necessities are in America. And we actually, the team that I was with both times, went up into a rural community, and they don't have clean water, they don't have electricity, they don't have health care up there, and it takes about, on a good day, it would probably take you at least an hour to get down the mountain in a very difficult trip around the mountain, big rocks and all that kind of stuff to get down to medical care. So, and then they don't have any source of income up on the mountain, like there's no businesses or anything up there. So you just kind of, in our American way of thinking, you're like, nothing's changing hands. How does anybody have any money? How does anybody do anything? And yet, you meet people up there who have this amazing sense of peace and joy and contentment in their lives. And I wanted to tell you about these two guys, Frankie and Mark, and they, on the two trips that I was on, they were the team leaders for the organization that we went with. They're actually Haitians, born and raised in Haiti. One might have been born in the Dominican Republic, but they live in Haiti now. And both of them experienced the earthquake firsthand, you know, and we got told all about that and what that looks like in terms of literally walking over dead bodies and, you know, tons of people you knew and loved that died on that day and all those experiences that they've had. And yet both these men have these amazing stories and this amazing joy. One of them, from the first time I went, his name was Frankie, and Frankie's sister had actually just passed away. And so you knew there was a little bit of sadness like within him, that he was just kind of, sometimes he would just kind of have to go get a nap and rest up because he had just been through something super traumatic. But on a regular basis, he has a couple of children. They were taking in his sister's children, and then they would feed about 6 other children that lived on the street all their meals every day. So in essence, they were basically running like a 10-child orphanage, you know, on a regular basis. And his heart was really to one day get a much larger orphanage and take care of the street children in Haiti. So that's Frankie. And Frankie acted like our big brother. I mean, he loved us. He watched over us all the time and had this incredible sort of just that calm sense of peace that some people have. And I don't know that I'm going to have that in this life because I'm a little too emotional for that. But he just had this really calm sense of peace. Now, the second trip that we went on was a guy named Mark. Mark was 27 years old. Mark was not married. I'm pretty sure he didn't have a girlfriend, so I talked to him a good bit. And Mark, I think at least once I saw him in the exact same outfit he'd already worn one time, you know, and that might have happened, I think maybe even more than once. So he probably didn't have this huge supply of clothing, lived in an apartment, and all these things. And in America, we would say, well, doesn't he need more than that? Doesn't he need a wife? Doesn't he, you know, need more clothes? Doesn't he need a car? I mean, very unlikely that he owned a car. Very few people own a car. You know, all the things that we think we have to have. And yet his joy was contagious. He had this pearly white, huge smile, real tall and thin, and we would tell the Bible stories to the children, and then he would translate it in Creole. And I mean, I would just kind of stand back when he translated, just be like, wow, that's the best story I ever heard. And I was one that just told it, but when he told it, it had all this emotion, and he just did a fabulous job telling those stories. And when Mark talked, we listened. I mean, you just kind of, everybody got quiet, and we were just like, you know, what's he going to say? And both the times that I was with teams in Haiti, we talked a lot about contentment. Because you just talk a lot about that when you're there. You're kind of baffled by The fact that you know that when you're at home, you think you need all these things, and you need a smartphone, and you need this, and you need that, and then when you're there and you don't have any of it, and yet you feel so full, and you're so happy and so joyful while you're there, it really kind of, you start to wrestle with, what do we really need, and what is contentment, and all that. And we were talking about it one night, and then Mark said, this is what I will tell you about contentment. He said, I live in an apartment. And he said, but I can wake up in the morning and I can step out of my apartment, and he said, I can see the ocean from the front of my apartment building. And he said, I can breathe in that ocean air. And he said, I can wake up every day and I can thank God for my breath. And I just did that this morning as I was like thinking about that story. I just took a deep breath. And I just thought, thank you, God, for my breath. I have another day today. It's another day of opportunities, another day to serve you. And I'll be honest with you, in my life right now, I could probably map out any day, and it is not going to look anything like I think it's going to look. I don't know what's going on, but that's just how it is right now. I have ideas about where I'm going to go for the next couple of hours, and the next thing I know, I'm at the Piggly Wiggly getting eggs and doing something I was not planning on doing. But the contentment issue and the need issue is something that I think we all face all the time. We do have needs, and I think the cool thing is that God recognizes that we have needs. He doesn't just ignore it throughout the scriptures, like, well, let's just pretend you're not hungry. Let's just pretend you don't have a place to sleep. He never does it like that, but what he does tell us is if we'll put him first, then he'll meet those needs. But what we see in John 4, 5, and 6, which were the kind of the passages that we looked at throughout the blog and for this morning, is a lot of people with a lot of different needs. There was a lot of needs, and then a lot of needs that Jesus met. He met all the needs we're going to talk about today in a really tangible way. If you think about John 4, that's the story of the Samaritan woman. She had some pretty tangible needs. She's coming in the middle of the day to get water out of a well. Okay? She's a Samaritan woman. And so from the Jewish perspective, she's an outcast because she's a Samaritan. Jesus shouldn't talk to her because she's a woman. And she's coming in the heat of the day, which probably means she doesn't have any friends. And she'd really rather avoid people because people are problematic. Because she's had 4 husbands, she lives with a man now, and everybody in town thinks she's a bad girl. Even back then, we like to categorize people in these sorts of ways. And Jesus doesn't have any of that kind of business. Jesus decides, this is a woman with a heart, and I'm after her, and I'm going to seek her. And so he interacts with that woman and offers her living water. And it's interesting that even in the discourse Jesus has with her, she has almost an argument for everything Jesus says. Like, he tells her something, and she's like, yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but what about that? And then they have this moment, and this is in your handout, because basically number 1 is that we all have a need for acceptance, and that woman had a need for acceptance. But they have a moment together where the woman says to Jesus, I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. Then Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, I am he. Now, that did not happen very often throughout Jesus' life. There are not very many people that got a straight up answer, I'm the Messiah. I'm the one the Jews have been waiting for. It's me. He just didn't speak that plainly to a lot of people. And yet his choice for one of the people that he's going to share completely, totally openly with is what that world and our world would probably call a sinful woman. And quite frankly, Jesus doesn't care in some sense of that. He does because he doesn't want us to hurt ourselves, and it grieves him when we sin because he knows it's difficult for us and it doesn't honor him. But at the same time, he's like, yeah, but I came for sinful people. So he totally meets that need for acceptance. And then I put a verse underneath that for you that, Jesus now, the Bible kind of tells us, He lives within us, but he also is on a throne, and he's seated next to God. But they call that throne, they being God and Jesus and the Spirit, in the scriptures, they call it a throne of grace. That we can go with confidence to the throne of grace. And we can receive mercy and find grace in our time of need. That in our time of need, there's a place to go, and Jesus isn't going to turn us away. He's going to meet us in that place, and He's going to extend grace and mercy. And you know, that need for acceptance is just so incredibly universal. I mean, whether you're a child and you need the love of your parents, as adults we need that need for acceptance. The problem is a lot of times we try to seek and meet that need for acceptance in other ways. I can be sort of a classic people pleaser and want to make people happy. I want to make people laugh and all those sorts of things. But we get our ultimate acceptance from Jesus Christ and His promises to us that He loves us and that He's never going to leave us. And there's a verse, Ephesians 1:6, that says we are accepted in the beloved. And we are accepted in Christ. When we have put our faith in Him, we are accepted. Now, He may want to work on things in our life, but we are accepted. I have kind of a strong connection to the story of this Samaritan woman because I was at a conference one time where the man that was speaking had just spoken on this story of the Samaritan woman. And then I went back to a meeting with some other people. And at the time, I was the teaching director of Community Bible Study, and there was a lot of other teaching directors in the room. And one lady said in there, she said, you know, sometimes you just start believing your own press. And in that environment, you do get a lot of thank yous, and you did a great job, and that touched me. Because, I mean, it's an amazing ministry that sort of the whole combination of things that you're doing, the Bible study and the speaking and all that all comes together, I think, for a great experience for people. But you can start to think, hey, I'm the teacher, and I know what I'm doing, and I've got this Jesus thing going on. And I don't know what it was, but when that lady said that, I literally went to the bathroom and cried, one of the hardest cries I've ever cried, like a gut cry. Because I was just like, I have totally forgotten that I'm the Samaritan woman. Totally forgot. Whoops. Forgot that I'm no different than her, that I've had experiences in my past that plenty of people would call me a sinful woman, and I'm no different than her. So I have a strong connection to that story because I just love, it's a healthy reminder that we are sinful people. And when Jesus came on the scene, He changed a lot of our sin to not just be the open, oh, I did this thing out in public for people to see, but He turned into everything that's happening in our heart. God sees it, and He knows all that sin, but He accepts us anyway and draws us near and wants to clean us up. So we all have that need for acceptance. We also see in this passage the need for healing. And I would say at different times, we all need healing, whether that healing is physical, whether it's emotional, whether it's spiritual. We all need healing at different times. And there's two stories in John 5 that talk about, well, John 4 and 5, where there's an official's son who's healed immediately. And then we have the story of the man who's laying on his mat, and Jesus comes up to him and says, would you like to be well? I mean, can you imagine? This is Jesus saying, would you like to be well? I would be like, yeah, can you just fix me once and for all? Can we just settle this, you know, so that I don't have any more issues? That would be so awesome. But the man says to Jesus, well, I can't get in that pool over there. And so in essence, he thinks everything he needs is inside that pool. All my needs are inside that pool. If I could just get in that pool before the next guy, then I'll be healed and life will be grand. And he doesn't realize that everything he needs is standing right in front of him. And then Jesus says, take up your mat and walk. And buddy, he stands up, takes up his mat, and walks off. And people are amazed that this man who's been crippled for 38 years can walk. So we know that it's possible for God to do ultimate healing. Now, I'm not one who likes to sort of shy away from hard questions. So I know that the question that sort of gets raised up in your mind is like, well, what about, and we have somebody in our midst who's had a family member die this week. So we know that there's death in this life. We live in a broken, fallen world. The promise that we have is that Jesus said, even in these passages this week that we looked at, I will raise you up on the last day. There will be a day when there is no more cancer, there's no more heart attack, there's no more diabetes, there's no more all those things. There will be ultimate healing. Now, I believe there's a lot of healing that takes place while we're here. I think God can heal physically. I've seen Him heal people emotionally a million times from bad, broken, difficult places. And I think healing is something that all of us need, really on a pretty regular basis, because we need to be cleansed of our sin and refreshed and filled back up with Jesus. And that is something that He can do for sure, is that He can heal. Whether it's in this life or in the next life, there'll be a time that we're all completely well, which will be incredible and awesome. So then we also have the need for provision. And we have a pretty awesome story there in terms of provision in John 6, where he feeds many, many people from this little sack lunch, basically. And it's a pretty fun story, I think, because the Bible tells us plainly that Jesus says it just to test them. Like, let's see if they're going to pass this test. Let's see if they figured out that I am the bread of life, I got it all, and if they would just ask me, I can figure it out. Let's see. Well, they failed the test because one of them says, we don't have near enough money to feed these people. And then the other one, and I could be wrong, maybe Andrew was full of faith when he brought that sack lunch. But I think he went, well, we got 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, but I don't think that's going to help these people. And that's what I would have said. I'm like, we got this little sack lunch, but it ain't no good because there's tons of people and they're starving and this is not going to cut it. But basically, I love it because Jesus is like, okay, sit everybody down, give me the sack lunch, and just watch me show off. I don't need those people to stand up. I don't need to stand in line. Just sit down and watch me provide because I can provide. And then the cool thing at the end of that is when he tells the disciples, now everybody go get a basket and go pick up the leftovers. And so all 12 of them, you can just kind of imagine them, they've all got their little basket and fresh smelling bread and fish just right up there, just right up their nose to remind them that we have an abundant provider. He can provide in abundance. Abundance. And that's B right there. There was abundant provision. In Ephesians 3:21, right underneath that, that's B, and I'll go back to A in just a second. It says, now to him who's able to do far more abundantly than all we ask or think, according to the power at work within us, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus. So he can provide abundantly. And then I found this quote, which I absolutely love, from Chuck Swindoll, who's the commentator that I'm kind of reading along with as I'm studying. He says this, never gauge the size of a challenge in terms of our capability. Never gauge the size of a challenge in terms of our capability. What we have to offer is never enough. What we have to offer is never enough. Is that not like strangely comforting a little bit? Almost just to acknowledge, like, I don't have enough. I don't have enough for what's happening around me. I can't fix that person. I can't fix that. I can't change that. I can't heal that. I'm not the healer. I'm not the provider. It's almost freeing. And he goes on to say, God never calls us to provide. That's his responsibility. Instead, he calls us to commit whatever we have, even if it's no more than a sack lunch. His call comes with a promise. You take care of the addition, I'll be in charge of the multiplication, and the mission I've invited you to join will be accomplished. Isn't that awesome? So just what we have to offer is never enough. We all just say that with me? What we have to offer is never enough. I mean, it's just never enough. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I wake up most days thinking, there's enough. Okay, I got it mapped out. I know, I got my hours scheduled out. I know how this is going to go. I can kind of squeeze this in and get this done, and it's going to work today. I don't wake up and think, okay, it's not enough. I cannot handle today, but you can. And apparently, given my life lately, I should wake up and say, every day, you don't know what's going to happen today, Amy, but you are beyond yourself. So you just follow the leader and follow Jesus today and do what he asks you to do. And it's going to have to be enough. Great story Anne Graham Lotz tells on a teaching that she does on when Jesus turns water into wine. And she talks about a very busy season in her life where she had 3 young children. Now they're all grown and married and that kind of thing. But she had 3 young children. She had a Bible study fellowship class of about 500 people, which probably meant she had 200 or 300 children in a children's program as well. And she listed, multiple other responsibilities she had in her life at that time. And she said, and if you talk to my kids now, they would tell you they had a great growing up experience. And she said, when I look back at it, I think I was running around, basically like a chicken with my head cut off. And she said, but I just did what I thought I was supposed to do. And she said, all I can do is pour water into the jugs in the story where Jesus makes water wine. He tells the servant to go put water in there, and then he comes up and turns it into wine. And she said, all we can do is put water in the jugs, and Jesus is the one that has to make wine. We can't do that. But he can. We just put in what we can. We bring our little sack lunch. We might say, these are the hours I've got today. This is what I think this might look like. Maybe this is what I think is a good idea to help this person and to do this, Lord. But I can't do it without you. I need your multiplication to take part in this process with me. So we all have that need for provision. And we also have a need, I think, for confidence. We've got to have confidence that we can depend on the Lord, that he is going to be there with us, that he is going to show up. And in the passages in John 6, they have an experience where they're in a boat, they're on this particular body of water that is real prone to storms coming up real fast and real surprisingly. They're out in this boat, and they have basically rowed, I read, 3 to 4 miles at the point that Jesus shows up. So they're pretty much done, right? They're at that place where like, we don't have enough, we're never making it to the other side. And Jesus comes up to them, and they're afraid. And then his response to them is this: do not be afraid. He says, do not be afraid. And the passage says, then they were glad to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. I just kind of like that picture of it's like there they are, everybody's freaking out, they're up in arms, they're working like crazy, they're sweating, they're all hollering, we're not going to make it, what are we going to do, I'm exhausted, you take a turn, all this kind of stuff. So Jesus shows up, they're afraid, and he says, don't be afraid, it's me. He comes onto the boat, and then whoop, they're just over at land. It's just over. I mean, that little difficult moment is over. You know, when Jesus is with them, then they can have peace. And in this case, he resolves it immediately. Now, I think that we know in life, not everything resolves immediately, right? Some seasons are a lot longer than others. Some seasons, for some people, are what I call chronic sorrow, that it's not really going to go away. There's some difficulty in your life. There's somebody in your life with a disability, a drug addiction, something like that. And not that, I mean, drug addictions can totally be healed, but sometimes that's a chronic sorrow for a parent, or things like that. But we can have confidence that whatever we face, wherever we are, whatever difficulty we have, that he's with us. It's promised throughout the scriptures that if you're my child, if you've placed your faith in me, I am with you to walk you through the darkest hours, the most difficult moments, and I will walk you all the way into the next life. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. It's the promise he makes us in Hebrews 13:5. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. So we can have confidence in that. We can have confidence. Now, the interesting thing that takes place in this story is, so Jesus has fed all the people, then they have the experience in the boat overnight, and then the next day, all the people that Jesus fed before show back up to be fed again. They got fed yesterday, let's follow the guy that makes food. I'm hungry, you know, let's follow him. And I don't know about you, but I'm one of those people, like when I get hungry, it is not good. But when I was growing up, my mom and I'd be shopping, and she'd say, do you need something to eat? Because this is a problem. Your attitude is wearing me out, you know? Like, yes, I gotta eat. So I'm like that. So the hungry people have showed back up to Jesus. But Jesus says something very interesting to them in John 6:25. He says, truly, truly, I say to you, you are seeking me not because you saw signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. Do not labor for the food that perishes, but for the food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give to you. For on him God the Father has set his seal. And then all those people look at Jesus and they say, what do you want us to do? You know, and isn't that always what we want to know? It's kind of like, what am I supposed to do? I mean, we've got kind of these ideas in the Bible. It's like, what do you want me to do with that? And then his response to them was, this is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he has sent. That's the work I want you to do. I want you to believe. I want you to believe in me for salvation. I want you to believe in me for all the eternal promises. But I also want you to believe in me for whatever you need. I want you to believe in me. And he says he's the bread of life, he's the living water, that he is truly everything that we need. Now, y'all are probably like me, and a lot of days you think you have needs, and Jesus doesn't necessarily feel like the tangible answer to the needs. Next you're like, I need this thing, I need this problem fixed, I need this taken care of, I need an answer, I need to know what to do next, and all those types of things, that we feel like our needs are so significant. So our part down there at the bottom of your sheet is we have to believe that Jesus is enough for whatever we face. Believe that Jesus is enough. And I think we could find testimony after testimony after testimony of people that would say that they have lived through very, very difficult seasons. I mean, my grandmother buried 2 husbands. There's just so many different things that people walk through. I mean, Corrie ten Boom comes to mind. I mean, she lived through a concentration camp. People live through all sorts of difficult things, and the Lord gets them through it. Whatever it is that they're facing, the Lord walks them through and can give incredible peace in that difficulty if we'll look to Him instead of to other things. Because I think we have a tendency like the Samaritan woman. I mean, how many women, if not yourself, do you know that have looked to a man to meet their needs? Or vice versa. I mean, men too. You know, that a woman is going to be the answer to all your problems, or a man's going to be the answer to all your problems. That's still going on all the time. That type of thing. And then for the healing, to be looking at other places besides the Lord. You know, if I can just do that over there, it's all going to be okay. The need for provision. You know, those people came begging for bread again, and Jesus is like, you know, you don't really need that as much as you need me. You need me more than that. And He tells us in the scriptures, after a discourse on needs that people have, food and clothing and all this, where Jesus is saying, don't worry about that stuff. Seek me first and my kingdom and my righteousness, and all those things will be taken care of. I will take care of those things if you seek me first. So the second thing I would say there, first we want to believe that Jesus is enough, and then 2 is that we've got to reprogram our minds. Because I think we get really stuck thinking that this certain thing is going to be the answer to all my problems. If there's a relational issue that I have in my life right now would be resolved, then everything would be okay. If this financial issue in my life right now would be resolved, then everything would be okay. If my marriage was okay. If I had a marriage, I'd be okay. If I had children, I'd be okay. If my children would leave my house, I'd be okay. I mean, whatever it is, we've always got this notion that the need is going to be met there. But y'all know as well as I do, as I thought about this, it doesn't matter what it is. One need gets resolved and another one's around the corner. And I really feel like that's what God's trying to teach me right now. It's just, you have got to believe that I'm enough and I will meet your needs every day. In the midst of unresolved situations, I am the one who will satisfy you and not all those other things. And in Ephesians 6, it talks about how we need the armor of God. And it says we need the armor of God because the devil has a scheme against us. If you want to go read Ephesians 6 later, that's a great chapter. But the scheme, I'll tell you, one of the schemes for sure that he has for you and for me is that he wants to tell you that you have a need that's not being met. That's what he does. That's what he started the whole story with in Genesis when he went to Eve and he said, God's holding out on you. You have a need that hasn't been met. You need this right here. And he's been doing that ever since. You need this thing. You have to have this thing. God's holding out on you. God's not good because you don't have what you think you need. And then we go run after it to try to meet that need by ourselves, apart from God. You know, the Bible tells us if we'll delight ourselves in the Lord, He wants to give us the desires of our heart. But our hearts have to be secure in Him first. We have to believe that He's enough first. And so that passage in Ephesians says that we have to take up the shield of faith so that we can handle the fiery darts of the evil one. And so the next time you hear, you need this, you have to have this, you're not going to be okay without this. If this doesn't be resolved today, you're going to die. You're not going to make it. Have you ever heard that sentence in your head? Like, I'm just not going to make it. I'm just not going to make it. I'm not going to make it. I've heard that way too many times inside my head. But that's a fiery dart from the enemy, and my response to that needs to be to pick up my shield of faith and say, Jesus is enough. Jesus is enough for today, and that's all He's told me to worry about is today. He's enough for today, and I'm going to trust in that. Because He has truly promised to meet the needs that we have. He has promised to do that. And ultimately, He's met our greatest need when He left heaven and came down to earth so that He could stand among sinful people and say, I'm the bread of life. I'm what what you need. Place your faith in me for salvation, and your eternity will be secure. You can be confident that I'm always with you, and I will carry you into the next life and give you a perfectly well body that is no longer aging. Take care of that for you. That's what he promises us. And we just got to believe him for salvation and also for our everyday. We've got to believe that Jesus is enough. So let's pray together. God, I just pray for everybody here and everybody who might hear this message. There's so many lies that are thrown at us, God, that we need this, we need that. We're not going to be okay unless certain things are resolved or fixed or in a different place. And God, you come in the middle of that and say, hey, I'm the bread of life. I'm the living water that you need. If you will come to me, then together we will work through all those other things. And I will provide what you need for today. I just pray for every woman in this room and every person who might be listening, God, that we would truly be able to pick up our shield of faith and just believe that you are enough for us and that we can truly have joy in whatever circumstance we're in and whatever need that we face. If we will turn to you, you will meet that need in your time and your way. We praise you for that and your faithfulness. In Jesus' name, amen.